Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and strength coach, and I specialize in vestibular disorders. Welcome to my channel, The Steady Coach. Today we're going to be talking about whether diet and lifestyle changes can cure chronic dizziness. These are questions that I'm asked quite frequently by people I work with one-on-one, or here on YouTube, or even in my membership community. So let's tackle diet and lifestyle changes today. Now, if you've done any online research about your condition, which I assume includes about 99.99999% of you, you've almost certainly come across websites, articles, books, and social networking groups in which people are talking about various restrictive diets that are purported to help with your symptoms. These include things like low histamine diets, ketogenic diets, low inflammation diets, the Walls Protocol, and various other strict forms of elimination diets. You've probably also read about the importance of getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, and getting some sunshine. Now, dietary changes and lifestyle changes do have a role in the management of your condition, and we're going to talk about what that role might be. But I first want to say that in general, there is very little quality research, if any, indicating that dietary restrictions like this can help people with problems like chronic dizziness. That doesn't mean that it's not true. Anecdotal evidence, in other words, evidence from large groups of patients or providers who work with patients like these, can be taken as useful information to help guide you through making these kinds of changes. But it is very important to point out that there's no hard and fast evidence that shows that these kinds of changes are going to reduce your dizziness or cure your dizziness. I think it's very important to understand that actually the emphasis on these kinds of changes can actually be really problematic. And here's why. Now, I want you to be healthy. We know that stress and dizziness are related. Even if you don't totally buy into my belief that stress causes dizziness, you probably have been able to tell that stressful life experiences or stress throughout your day does affect your dizziness levels. So in theory, if a poor diet or not getting enough exercise are putting more stress on you, then that could potentially increase the volume or the intensity, in other words, of your dizziness. But here's the problem. In many cases, when people are encouraged to take on these kinds of regimens, either vitamins and supplements, or really dramatic dietary changes, or really dramatic lifestyle changes, they're encouraged to do this in a very extreme way and to very closely monitor their symptoms as they make these changes. And this makes a lot of sense, right, on the surface. And in fact, I myself have encouraged people to do this in the past. I have encouraged people to keep logs and diaries of their dizziness. The American Migraine Foundation recommends this on their website. So this is a very commonly utilized recommendation. But now I think it's absolutely the wrong approach. I think that by taking on very restrictive or major lifestyle changes and asking you to monitor your symptoms at the same time, we are devoting even more brain power to your dizziness. We are setting off the alarm system in the brain even more. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say you take on a low histamine diet and you're encouraged at the same time to keep track of how your dizziness is feeling. What happens if you accidentally eat a food that's outside the histamine diet? What happens then? You're paying attention to every little piece of food you put in your mouth, and you're paying attention to every moment of your dizziness. Again, what does that tell your brain? It tells your brain, pay attention to this thing, it's actually dangerous. That is exactly the opposite approach of what we know works with chronic dizziness. Because chronic dizziness is the result of a fight or flight or alert, danger type response in the brain, increasing the danger and alert signal about your dizziness is completely counterproductive. I've seen people have complete meltdowns because they accidentally ate a food that was outside of the diet they believed was keeping them less dizzy or was supposed to make them less dizzy, and that made them more dizzy. And it wasn't the food, it was the fact that they were so worried and scared about it. So what I'm saying is, asking people who are already focused on their dizziness to pay more attention to their dizziness and start worrying about food as well is, for many people, the wrong approach. Now, if you have followed a specific restrictive diet and it's helped you, that's fantastic. I'm not saying that you shouldn't make dietary changes. And again, I'm going to address that in a moment. What I'm saying is the approach you take is going to be very, very important. The changes themselves are less important than the approach you take. Okay, so now let's switch gears for a moment, and I'm going to explain my view on where dietary and lifestyle changes fall in the whole of your dizziness approach. Every single one of us has what I call a stress bucket. So again, you don't have to fully buy into the idea that stress causes dizziness. We do know that stress affects dizziness. I think most of us can agree on that. So we all have a stress bucket in which many ingredients are placed. Things like annoying emails, someone yelling at us, having some kind of conflict with someone, those things go in the bucket. I also argue that some of the major ingredients in the bucket are things like repressed emotions from current experiences or unresolved traumas from the past, as well as traits like perfectionism and feeling like you should be pleasing people, because again, that adds more pressure. So that's an ingredient that goes in this bucket. So in this metaphor, the stress is building up over time, and once it's at a high enough level, it triggers that sympathetic nervous system response, which leads to dizziness. That's why something like parasympathetic breathing can make your dizziness better. It's because it turns down that fight, flight, or hypervigilant response, but it does not take care of the stress in the bucket. And that's why parasympathetic breathing doesn't make your dizziness completely go away forever. So on the whole, the best approach that I know to help people with chronic dizziness is to help them figure out the ingredients in his or her own personal bucket. But that's not the only tool that we have. We can also increase the size of the bucket. And this is an idea that I call stress tolerance. So everyone has different size buckets. Some people have bigger buckets and they can have more ingredients in their buckets before the bucket explodes, and other people have smaller buckets. When you have dizziness and your world has shrunk down, you might have ended up with a smaller bucket. Because things that make our bucket bigger are things like having a social support system, having a healthy diet, being able to get outside, being able to get exercise. So all those things you can think of as ways to increase stress tolerance. In other words, ways to make your bucket bigger so that when life stress pours in there, the bucket doesn't overflow. So that's the role that you should think about dietary and lifestyle changes taking in helping you with your chronic dizziness. So you want to increase your stress tolerance as much as you can. And the way to do that are the obvious things: having a relatively healthy, balanced diet, getting exercise, getting outside, and dare I say, have fun sometimes, which I know is a very tall order for those of you with dizziness. But even just small things that you do can help increase the size of your bucket and prevent it from spilling over when life stress goes in. Now, a word about caffeine, alcohol, and salt. So caffeine and alcohol are known triggers for migraines, and salt is a known trigger for Meniere's-like attacks. So Meniere's being another inner ear disease that, in my opinion, has very strong neural circuit components. And I'll have more information on Meniere's disease on my channel in the future. But in any case, when you hear the word trigger, so when someone says the word trigger to you, that means that it is affecting the size of your bucket. When someone drinks a lot of alcohol, stress tolerance goes way down. When someone drinks a lot of caffeine, stress tolerance can go down. And to illustrate this, I'm going to explain that I myself have suffered from migraines nearly my whole life. I get them very, very rarely now. But caffeine was definitely something that was an identifiable trigger. The way I look at caffeine now, though, is not that it caused a migraine. Caffeine never really caused my migraines. Caffeine made my bucket smaller. And when my bucket was smaller, the stressors of everyday life tended to overflow, activate that brain circuit, and cause a migraine. And for people with Meniere's disease, salt may serve that role. Again, the clinical evidence on salt for Meniere's disease or salt restriction for Meniere's disease is shaky, but if you want to give it a try, you're welcome to. And if it works for you, fantastic. In any case, if you want to see if you can improve your symptoms by modifying your lifestyle or your diet, I 100% support you, but I very strongly urge you to think of this the way that I just described. You are trying to increase the size of your bucket. In other words, you're trying to increase your stress tolerance. You're not trying to cure your dizziness, because diet and lifestyle aren't causing your dizziness. They're just making it more likely that other stressors in your life are going to trigger dizziness. Those aren't the same thing. And if you approach your dietary and lifestyle changes with so much obsessiveness and so much detail-orientedness that you are constantly drawing your attention back to your dizziness, constantly monitoring it, constantly worrying about your diet, it is going to make your dizziness worse. I see this happen over and over and over again. So my general advice is follow a sensible diet. Eat as many whole foods as you can. Try to reduce the processed foods you eat. Try to reduce processed sugars. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're getting enough natural light if possible in the morning and throughout the day. Make sure you're turning your lights down in the evening so that you don't disrupt the release of your sleep hormones. Make sure your bedroom is being used only for its intended purposes, including sleep. Try to drink enough water. And if you have any inclination to do so, I would recommend cutting down on or eliminating caffeine and alcohol. These types of sensible lifestyle changes are going to increase your stress tolerance no matter what point you're at in your healing, whether you have dizziness or not. And the focus, again, should be on the bucket rather than the symptoms themselves. I hope that approach was helpful for you guys, and I'd love to hear your comments on it. So please let me know if you have any questions or thoughts. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.